Thanks, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome. We're so glad to have you with us today for this session. And we are really thrilled to have so many folks joining us from, of course, all over the world. I want to invite you, as you're joining, to please introduce yourself in the chat so we can get to know who is in the room with us. You can share your name. If you're with an organization, please share that. And also where you're from today. We want to see the diversity that's represented in the room. And again, welcome to this session on the Faith for Earth, UNEA webinar, What the World Expects from Faith-Based Organizations and What We Should Do. So as we get started today, again, please introduce yourself in the chat. And there will be time for questions when we break into today. So we're going to ask you to hold your questions for that part of our time today. So as we begin, we want to invite Rabbi Yonatan Nerel to share with us a spiritual grounding as we get started in our time together.
You're muted, Jonathan.
So here we are on planet Earth at a moment when everything hangs in the balance. Hangs in the balance from the perspective of ecological sustainability, of whether we will merit to let our children inherit a livable and thriving and spiritually aware planet. And things hang in the balance in terms of peace between peoples. It's significant that our coming together today is taking place amidst the war in Ukraine, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And as we come together to discuss faith-based ecological solutions, I also want to bear witness to the threat of nuclear explosions and of nuclear accidents in Ukraine, and the very perilous moment that we're perched on as a people. The conflict in Ukraine, which has some religious connections, is fundamentally a test for humanity of our ability to rise above our fighting. And so I just want to give us a blessing that we should be able to come together as people of goodwill for many faiths to work toward peace and to work toward a planet and a common home that is sustainable and thriving.
You. Thank you, Rabbi. We're so grateful for your presence here today. And I do want to take some time to introduce our panelists who will be participating today. My name is Reverend Susan Hendershot, and I serve as president of Interfaith Power&Light. And I am joined today by Chantal Elkin, head of Beliefs and Values Program at World Wildlife Fund, Fletcher Harper, who is the executive director of Green Faith, Rabbi Yonatan Nerel, founder and director of the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development, Yakir Manela, CEO of Hazon and Pearlstone, Martin Palmer, who is the founder and CEO of Faith Invest, and Sonam Yangchen, Youth and Education Officer for World Wildlife Fund, Bhutan. So I've asked each of our panelists today to take just a couple of minutes to introduce their organization in case you're not familiar with those organizations. And so Chantal, I'm going to turn it over to you to start with the Beliefs and Values Program at World Wildlife Fund.
Thank you, Susan. It's a true pleasure to be here with you all today. So I'm Chantal. I run WWF's Beliefs and Values Program. We work with religious and spiritual partners around the world to protect and restore global biodiversity. And most of you are probably familiar with WWF. It's one of the largest environmental organizations. We work in about 100 countries to protect Earth's natural systems and to ensure that people and nature live in harmony. And my program, the Beliefs and Values program, works with our global offices and with faith communities in three main ways. First and foremost, we help bring faith and conservation partners together at the grassroots level in different countries to work together to protect and restore nature. And for example, we work with Buddhist monks in Southeast Asia on conserving forests. We work with Muslim leaders and communities in Indonesia to reduce the illegal trade in animals. We work with Hindu temples in India on sacred river protection and on ensuring that religious pilgrimage to sacred natural sites is done in an environmentally friendly way. And we work with Christian partners in Latin America and Africa on restoring degraded lands through things like tree growing and fire mitigation. And the second way we work with faith groups is to help lift up faith voices in international advocacy around biodiversity at the UN level, for example, at the recent Glasgow climate change talks in November, and in the upcoming Convention on Biological Diversity talks coming up in China later this year. And thirdly, we work to support and encourage faith groups around the world to take a long-term view and to really try to put together long-term 10-year environmental action plans that span this next critical decade so that we can all work together to restore and protect nature. And we're doing that primarily through the Faith Plans program with the organization Faith Invest. So I'll leave it there, and I'm here with my very esteemed colleague from WWF Bhutan, our office there, Sonam Yangchen, and I will turn the floor over to her to introduce herself. Thank you.
Thank you, Chantal. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sonam Yangchen, and I am a program officer at the World Wildlife Fund office in Bhutan, where I oversee the Youth and Education program. And I'm here on behalf of the WWF Bhutan office to speak to you about our new efforts to making conservation more inclusive in Bhutan by engaging our faith-based organizations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm glad you're with us today. And now I'll invite Fletcher Harper to introduce Green Faith.
Thanks so much, and good to see everyone. Green Faith is an international interfaith grassroots climate activism organization. We work with a very diverse range of religious partners in Asia, Africa, Latin America, Europe, North America, building power among grassroots religious and spiritual communities, and campaigning against new fossil fuel deforestation and extractive projects, pressuring the banks and financial institutions, asset managers that are bankrolling the planet's destruction, organizing support for a just transition from fossil fuels for impacted workers and communities, and also policies that will create green jobs to help lift people out of poverty for a better future. We have organizing teams working in those 5 different regions that I mentioned previously. I can see that our Latin America regional coordinator, Reverend Dr. Nettie Astudillo, is on the call, and she's doing wonderful work in that region. A couple of our highest profile actions right now, our teams in Europe and Africa are working to oppose the East Africa crude oil pipeline, which is a highly destructive pipeline, both from the perspective of local livelihoods and biodiversity across Tanzania and Uganda, financed and enabled largely, not exclusively, but largely by French government and corporate sources. We also are working in the United States to press President Biden to revoke permits for new fossil fuel projects across the United States. It's wonderful to be with you all, and we look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Fletcher. Now I'm going to turn to Jonathan to introduce the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development.
So the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development is revealing the connection between religion and ecology and mobilizing people to act. We're doing that through a few different projects. We're working on a faith-inspired renewable energy project in Africa to deploy commercial scale solar field on church lands on an Anglican diocese in Mozambique. We also do work on thought leadership via our blog, several blog posts a week, a YouTube channel which has about 330 videos, and frequent Facebook and Twitter posts on religion and ecology. We also published a book, Eco Bible, which is an ecological commentary on the Hebrew Bible. And as part of that effort, we are working with a Lutheran pastor in Kentucky and developing Christian preaching resources on the Bible and ecology once a month and distributing those to hundreds of Christian priests and pastors.
Thank you, Jonathan. Wonderful work. And I have the Eco Bible on my shelf right next to me. So thanks for sharing that. Now I will turn to Yakir to introduce Hazon.
Shalom, everyone. My name is Yakir Manel, and I'm the CEO of Hazon, which is the leading Jewish environmental organization, where our mission is to lead a transformative movement deeply weaving sustainability into the fabric of Jewish life in order to create a healthier, more sustainable, and more equitable world for all. We work to connect people to the earth and to each other, and really lead that movement, build that movement through immersive, transformative experiences, experiential Jewish outdoor education, and impactful communal climate action. We're trying to create culture change and systemic change across the Jewish world and beyond. And we impact over 50,000 people each year, Jews of all ages and backgrounds, and many interfaith and multicultural groups as well, through 2 retreat centers, one in Baltimore and one in New York, an impact hub in Detroit, and programming and partnerships across North America and around the world. 2 models for replication that we think are particularly relevant in this context. One is the Jewish Youth Climate Movement, a group of young people, a youth group led by teens that has grown exponentially over the last few years. These teens are empowered, they are enthusiastic, they are stepping up as activists. They're really profoundly inspiring. And the other is the Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition, something we're about to launch, bringing together the largest Jewish organizations in the world and helping them create climate action plans. This is really systemic change at pace and at scale, and we're really excited to see that move and hopefully become a model for other faith communities. And as we say in the Jewish tradition, Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad, how pleasant it is to dwell together with brothers and sisters. It's great to be with you all today.
Thank you, Yakir, and thanks for being here. And now I will turn to Martin Palmer, who will introduce Faith Invest.
Thank you, Susan. Indeed. Background, I've been involved in religion and environment programs for almost 40 years. And it was my great privilege to work with the then international president of WWF, His Royal Highness Prince Philip, when we convened the first ever meeting in 1986. 5 major religions, Buddhism, Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, and Judaism, in the sacred city of Assisi, along with every major environmental group that then existed, to launch the idea that there could be a partnership between the faiths in their own right and the call for greater action to protect our living planet by the conservation movement. In a very great sense, I would say that groups like UNEP and other such secular groups have been the prophets, the callers to us in the faith to action. When we planned the event in 1986, there were 3 religious environmental projects around the world of any significance, 1 Buddhist, 1 Christian, 1 multi-faith. Now the UN estimates us in the millions of projects, from parishes to synagogues to temples around the world. So it's been very exciting, and this is a wonderful occasion to see that breadth and depth that has grown over those years. For many years, I was the Secretary General of the Alliance of Religions and Conservation, where Chantal worked for many years with me on the whole issue of illegal wildlife. And that organization had 2 goals. One was to get every major religious tradition in the world to develop their own environmental programs based on their own teachings. And we ended up in 2019 with over 700 such religious traditions. And the second one was to get the secular world, like UNEP, to take the faith seriously as potential partners, as serious partners on the ground, And this event today is a living manifestation of precisely what we were hoping would happen. But one of the things that emerged in the life of ARC, we closed in 2019 because we'd done what we set out to do, was the fact that the faiths were major stakeholders in the planet. An awful lot of the earlier work by the faiths on the environment was protest. It was telling other people what they ought to do, rather than actually looking at what they themselves were doing. And so in 2019, out of ARC came Chantel's program, the Beliefs and Values, and also the organization which I head at the moment called Faith Invest. And Faith Invest essentially says, look, the faiths probably have something in the region of 10 to 12 trillion dollars worth of investments. They own 8% of the habitable surface of the planet. They run 50% of all schools. We are stakeholders. And we focus in Faith Invest on that stakeholder role. We have a program with WWF called the Faith Plans. This is a huge network of over 30 different organizations. Just about everybody in the call today is a member of that coalition, reaching out to tens of thousands of local communities around the world from every major faith, from the Taoists of China, the Shinto of Japan, Christians and Muslims in Africa, etc. And our particular focus in Faith Invest is to move the investments of the faiths. They support through their grants wonderful work. Very often how they got that money is investing in the very problems that cause the issues that they're trying to solve. So we work with a concept called faith consistent investing. We have $500 billion worth of religious investment that has already said it will move. And we're now looking for projects that are sustainable, environmental, that have due diligence, and that means that we can get the faiths to be the major investors in the kind of world we want to see.
Thank you, Martin, and so glad you're with us today. I'm just going to take a moment to introduce Interfaith Power and Light. So Interfaith Power and Light's mission is to inspire and mobilize people of faith and conscience to take bold and just action on climate change. We are a US-based organization, and we work primarily in 3 ways. Through programs that teach congregations and individuals how to lower their energy use as an act of faith. And through that, we are partnering with Faith Plans and Faith Invest. We also communicate about climate change as a moral and spiritual issue, so slightly different than what we mainly hear in mainstream media. And through public policy advocacy at the local, state, and national levels in the US, in partnership with our 40 state affiliates and the 22,000 congregations that are a part of our network here in the US. So I'm really glad to be with you today, and I'm really pleased to be with all of our esteemed colleagues to have this conversation. So as we begin the panel part of our conversation today, I just want to share that I think the beauty of today's conversation is that we are joined by leaders of a number of faith-based organizations that have been working for solutions for decades. Certainly our panelists are among them, but I'm also referring to those of you who are joining as participants today. There's a great deal of expertise in this room from those addressing the climate and environmental crises through policy advocacy, through grassroots activism, sustainable lifestyles, religious education and worldviews, asset and facility management, habitat and species protection, science, policy, faith, nexus, integration, and more. The question of why the work of faith-based organizations is so critical in solving the environmental crisis has been repeatedly asked and answered in terms of how all religions consider care for our sacred earth and our moral responsibility to all living beings as central to our religious teachings, our stewardship role as caretakers of both our assets, such as land and physical spaces, and also the earth itself. And the fact that faith-based organizations have the ability to reach more people globally than any other sector. I hope that as part of our conversation today, we can go deeper and explore some of the challenges that faith-based organizations face in becoming even more effective in this work. From resistance by individuals and institutions, to gaps and blind spots in our work, to funding shortfalls that limit our capacity and reach. And as part of our time together, we'll be breaking into smaller breakout rooms so we can hear from the collective wisdom of all of you who are gathered here today. So with that, we're going to dig into some questions for our panelists, and we're going to start with a question for Chantal today. And that is, what are some of the faith-based organization models that are inspiring people?
With such significant potential worldwide, including in East Africa. Can you hear me, Susan?
I can, yes.
Great. Thank you. Well, there really isn't enough time in this few minutes that I have to convey just the incredible variety of inspiring models and examples out there in the faith world. Faith groups are doing incredible things to protect and restore nature. But I'll just offer a couple of examples that I hope will be inspiring to you. One is from my own experience living in Cambodia some years ago, when I came across a group of Buddhist monks who were protecting a large forest area, about 20,000 hectares. And they were actually going out on patrol every day to stop illegal logging and illegal hunting, and really being successful and inspiring local communities also to protect the forest. And I was just so fascinated by what they were doing, why they were out of the temple, and why they were in the forest, putting themselves in danger to protect this forest. And I came to understand that their motivation really was from their deep-seated Buddhist beliefs that all beings are interconnected, that they wanted to end the suffering of all beings, and they wanted to honor the place where the Buddha was born, where he was enlightened, where he passed away. And so it was really my moment of realization when I understood that the conservation movement really needed to engage and support faith partners in doing what they're already doing. As Martin conveyed, there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Buddhist and other communities working to conserve the earth. So we started to support a network of Buddhist monks in the country who were leading their own grassroots initiatives to protect wildlife and forests. And we connected them, we gave them technical support that they asked for to understand more about the conservation regulations and threatened species and other conservation topics. We brought them together in dialogue so that they could learn from each other and strengthen each other's efforts. And we also shared their stories more widely in the Buddhist world in Southeast Asia. So because my time's very short, I'll just give one other illustration, which is a bit of a different approach, which we held in Indonesia, which was more of a top-level policy initiative at the beginning, when we engaged with the Islamic leadership of Indonesia, the National Islamic Council. And we approached them with different conservation organizations to discuss the biodiversity crisis in Indonesia. And after they went back and debated how Islamic teachings related to the environment for several months, the top clerics were discussing this, they came back with 2 unprecedented fatwas, Islamic edicts that they issued at the national level, which basically asked every single Muslim in the country to protect nature as part of their religious duty. And then from that, what flowed was a whole training and awareness program that we helped put together with the National Council to raise awareness about these fatwas in local communities with local Muslim leaders from mosques and schools and community groups. And now over 1,000 preachers and Muslim leaders are talking about these, the way that Islamic teaching relates to nature protection in their communities. So those are 2 quick, very different examples, but I just want to encourage everyone to join the movement and grow the movement. There are so many ways to be involved. It would be incredible if you simply reached out to a local environmental organization, if you're interested in partnering with an environmental group, or to think about developing a long-term environmental action plan. But we would love to support your efforts, and we urge you to get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chantal. And those are wonderful examples of really listening to what was happening at the local level and involving local leadership, but providing support and resources in order for them to enact those projects. So really wonderful work. And with that, I do want to turn to Sonam, because she is with us here from Bhutan. And Sonam, I would really love for you to share with all of us an example of some inspiring work that's happening on the ground in Bhutan.
Sure, thank you so much. So everyone knows Bhutan to be a leading country in environmental conservation, and this can be attributed to the influence of Buddhism and its inherently pro-environmental belief and value system. However, in recent years, rapid modernization and this explosion of consumerism is really threatening to degrade not only our precious environment, but our equally precious beliefs and value system. And this really demonstrates how intertwined environmental conservation and preservation of spirituality is in Bhutan. So any efforts to preserve Buddhist traditions greatly contribute to our conservation efforts. And in a similar way, any sign of environmental degradation, especially those that are human-induced, signals some sense of moral degeneration in society. So that is, in fact, the context for what we are currently embarking on. We are in the midst of developing a new long-term partnership with Bhutan's national religious body, known as the Central Monastic Body. And the Central Monastic Body is the country's most eminent religious institution since its establishment, in the 17th century. So the focus of this partnership really will be to blend conservation science and Buddhist wisdom so that we can recontextualize Buddhism and re-emphasize Buddhist teachings so that it is applicable in the modern context. So specifically in this case, addressing the contemporary situations of the climate change, nature loss, and the biodiversity crisis. So the main output for this partnership that we're envisioning is this joint strategy and a long-term environmental plan between WWF Bhutan and the Central Monastic Body. And we hope that this joint strategy and the long-term environmental plan will work hand in hand to transform Bhutan's many monastic communities into conservation champions so that we can raise the environmental consciousness of the entire Bhutanese society and thereby aid in transitioning our growingly consumeristic society to a more values-driven society, which is consistent with the Buddhist way of life. So really what we hope to do is we really want this to be a model for grassroots environmental action that is, spearheaded from both the science perspective and the faith perspective. And this is a movement that we're, within amongst ourselves, we're calling it a movement for enlightened stewardship. And what this movement will do is not only will it help to achieve the conservation agenda of mainstreaming sustainable lifestyles in Bhutan and strengthening our environmental stewardship, but also help to achieve the spiritual agenda of supporting our faith-based organizations to preserve and promote faith teachings and faith traditions in a more innovative and socially relevant approach. So just a quick summary of what we're doing, and we're just in the beginning phase. So in the next coming, months and years, with the support of the recent program, we hope that what we are envisioning will materialize into this big aspiration. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. What an inspiring model of really combining scientific principles, but also with spiritual values, and seeing how that can transform the work on the ground. So thank you for sharing that. And Fletcher, I'm going to turn to you because we have all these wonderful models of things that are happening. This was obviously just a quick snapshot, but I'm curious to hear your perspective about why you think more isn't being done on religion and ecology by religious institutions, and why you think maybe religious institutions have been so resistant to the ecological message.
I think there are two things in play. One is religious institutions on this issue, compared to many others, have moved reasonably quickly. They're large ships, to use that analogy. They take a long time to turn around. And, using Martin's sort of date post of 1986 as a starting point, you could make a legitimate argument that religious groups have moved pretty quickly to address these concerns. So I think that's to be taken on the one hand. On the other hand, I think it's instructive that the people on this call are all people who in one way or another have started religious environmental initiatives and sustained them outside of existing religious hierarchies. And I think that that's something that religious communities as a whole, perhaps should reckon with, or perhaps we just need to be upfront about the fact that while these established religious communities are indeed large, really widely distributed, and hold a lot of assets, they are not necessarily in the movement building business anymore. That's a characteristic skill that comes from much younger religious communities and traditions and movements and sects and lineages. And to address a crisis that is the size and the scope and the intensity of the one that we're facing, from our perspective, clearly requires a movement. And the strategies that I think in different ways all of the groups represented on this call utilize are in many ways movement building strategies. But established religious institutions, partly because they have to address a very wide range of concerns, partly because they are uncomfortable dealing with issues which inevitably, with this topic, involve economics and politics, and partly because they are often inherently conservative with a small c in terms of institutional self-sustaining behavior. Just are hesitant to use a US expression, to jump in the deep end. So I think we're dealing with a very complicated and really important question here. We all understand the scope and the size and the intensity of the problem. We all understand that religious communities are, an enormous stakeholder group. And we all, at least, I think we all on this call, share the same impatience for those communities to do more. So I think this would serve to some degree as an appeal to religious leaders, both to reckon seriously with the intensity and the seriousness of the problem, to ask themselves seriously what's the best way to address that, and to consider more in-depth partnerships with the different NGOs around the world that have emerged that specialize in this area and that have skills in movement acceleration in various forms.
Great. Thank you, Fletcher. Thanks for that response. And I want to turn to Jonathan, because as one of the folks on this call who has indeed started and founded one of those religious NGOs, and in response to what Fletcher just shared, I'm curious to know what you think what you think is needed in order for faith-based organizations to actually do more and to really hit their capacity in terms of what we could and should be doing.
Thank you, Susan. There's so much potential in this work. And I really believe that the ecological crisis is a spiritual crisis. It's not about the birds and the bees and the trees and the toads only, but it's about how we live as spiritual beings in a physical reality. And I don't think we're going to achieve a sustainable humanity unless we have the active leadership of religious communities. So in order to make that happen, I think that philanthropy really needs to step up to the plate and scale its commitment to this field. You know, last year in 2021 in the United States, which is more philanthropy of any countries from the US, there was about $500 billion given. Among that, 11% was for environment and animals. And of the total amount, less than 1% was for climate change. There's no statistics about how much philanthropic support the religion and ecology movement gets each year, but I would estimate it's probably in the tens of millions of dollars. By comparison, one anti-aircraft system is about $500 million. So it's to me, there's a bit of an absurdity that the religion and ecology movement is the most important movement in the world today, in my view. And yet it's chronically underfunded. And many of us on this call have the experience of approaching funders for support, but for one reason or another, that doesn't take place. And so I think that a shift needs to take place within philanthropy from focusing on supporting university endowments, hospitals, museums, and other worthy causes to focusing on supporting sustainability and especially a movement that can really move the needle on this issue.
Yeah. Thank you. So I'm going to turn to Martin, because Martin, I know, as you know, you introduced yourself, you've been working in this space for a long time, and I would love to hear what you think could entice philanthropic institutions and religious donors to support the religion and ecology movement in a more robust way. Now, you've just heard what Jonathan shared about, you know, this is one of the key things that religious institutions need in order to be able to do more, is more philanthropic funding. So what do you think it's going to take to get us there?
I think one of the issues, and it was beautifully summed up by Satish Kumar, the Jain monk and environmentalist, where he said that the religious environmental movement is a quiet revolution. It's a revolution that very few people have really noticed, because it's taking place primarily at local community level. I think that Fletcher's analysis that we are movement builders rather than that we represent great structures of faith is spot on. And as such, it goes on very much under the surface for most people. There is also the problem that many funding agencies, whether they're secular or religious, have a real problem in funding just one faith. And they are terrified that if they fund faith somehow, what are we going to do? We're going to rush around and hand out free Bibles, free Qurans, free Bhagavad Gitas, free Tao Te Chings, and their status as a secular, serious, quasi-scientific, because most environmentalism is quasi-scientific, organization will be fundamentally undermined by all these weird religious people. Well, as you can see from the profile here, we are fairly weird, but we do get on with things really quite well at the same time, because what we know and what we understand is what is locked into the structures, the beliefs, the values of the faiths, which with a very little amount of prizing suddenly becomes something living, something that can actually make a fundamental difference. And I suppose that reservation about working with faith is very deep. Very few national governments will work officially with faiths. They will work sometimes with multi-faith groups. The other problem is that many secular groups want the faiths on a Friday in the mosque, a Saturday in the synagogue, a Sunday in the church, etc., to deliver their message for them free of charge, cheap as possible. Well, that's not why the faiths are engaged. The faiths are engaged because it comes from what we believe, not from what somebody outside tells us we should do. We need that wisdom, we need the knowledge, we need the expertise, but we have, as it were, the groundswell to make this operate. But I think And this is a really rare opportunity. Here we are with, and thanks to Iyad and his wonderful network of Faith for the Earth, here we have a public profile of something that most people will just have to hunt around to find. We are a quiet revolution. Maybe we need to start making more noise. I'm not sure. But I think the major thing is that for many, many, many years, each of us here has worked in our own particular silos. We've got on with it because the scale of the task of mobilizing the Jewish community, or mobilizing the states, or mobilizing different faiths around the world, the Taoists of China has been one of our big areas, or the Muslims, has taken highly concentrated time and energy. But in the last year and a half, partly because of COVID, partly because I think the movement has grown up, we're now working in coalitions. We're working with Iyad and his coalition at UNEP. We're working with faith plans with 30 different groups. So I think the change is coming about that at last we are confident enough in what we do to want to share it and do it side by side. Each of us still doing what we do best, but collectively, as Jonathan has said, collectively we are, and the UN in 2009 said the faith's environment movement was the largest civil society movement in the world. But most of the world hasn't noted us. So we need to be a little bit noisier. We need to be a bit more present. We need to be much more coordinated than we have been in the past. And we need to be able to tell the stories of success and to chart those. And this kind of event, Susan, is a huge, huge step forward in doing precisely that. But it's really just the tip of the iceberg. What you're pulling out of us today with your splendid questions and interrogation is just a hint of the scale that is out there. And I think what we need to do as a movement, and I go back to Fletcher, I think Fletcher's spot on. We are the movement that, as it were, helps the faith do what they should do. We have yet to really break through and get a major faith to sign up, with the exception, I would say, of the Catholic Church under the current Pope. But we are on the brink. And how do we attract more funding? I think we have to be out there with a bigger universal picture that is made up of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of local smaller groups who will do this, not because of some UN edict, not because of some government edict, not because some big funder who has a guilty conscience for the way they made all their money is trying to assuage their guilty conscience by giving lots of money away, but because we actually believe it.
Thank you. Thanks. And Yakir, I'm going to turn to you because now you've just heard Martin talk about working in coalitions, about the diversity of faith that's out there. Of course, referring to Fletcher's comments on being movement builders. And I would like to turn to you to ask, how do you think that we can promote diversity and inclusiveness at the leadership level? So as we're thinking about these coalitions and building this movement, how do we promote diversity and inclusiveness at the leadership level, really to reflect the global richness of faith and ecology space that's happening both at the leadership level and at the grassroots level?
Thank you, Susan. It's a really important question and really honored to be part of this group and part of this conversation today. And let's just name that the speakers today are not a terribly diverse group, and we are not meant to be representative of all the beautifully diverse faith traditions and communities all across the world. We've come together as a collaborative group, learning from and sharing with each other and thinking together about how we can collectively grow the impact of our field and our work far beyond the confines of our organizations and our faiths. And this movement, the faith and ecology movement, as we've talked about, is beautifully diverse. And really want to give thanks here to Iyad Abu-Mogli, founding director of the UN Environmental Programme's Faith for Earth initiative, and the over 20 plus Faith for Earth dialogue sessions really have brought together a wonderful, diverse array of speakers from so many ethnicities, cultures, and faith traditions. So thank you, Iyad. And I also want to highlight the need for generational diversity. As young people are stepping up as leaders in powerful new ways, I've had a chance to work with teen leaders through the Jewish Youth Climate Movement, and I can tell you that diversity and climate justice are fundamental priorities to this rising generation. So we all can either get with the program or get out of the way. And lastly, I really want to highlight the need for ideological diversity. For this movement to have the impact we seek and that which we need to empower diverse leadership, and we also need to engage and empower participation and action from those elements of our faith communities that do not think the way we do, who may not be aligned in seeing faith and earth as fundamentally interconnected as everyone here does. In our efforts building the Jewish Climate Leadership Coalition, I have seen firsthand how important it is to proactively avoid the tendency to preach to the choir, to build relationships and pathways for those denominations and demographics within the Jewish community who are currently participating the least in our movement. And I don't think that's unique to the Jewish community. I think it's true in every faith community. And we need them too. We need everyone. So as we think about diversity, I think we all know we have a lot of important work to do here in our organizations, on our work in this movement. And I really look forward to learning from everyone here as we think about how to walk that path forward together.
Thank you, Yakir. That is a beautiful segue to the next portion of our time together, which is that we are going to go into breakout groups. So you'll be joined with by some of the panelists in each of the groups. But we really want this to be an ongoing discussion and conversation between all of the expertise that's gathered here. I want to remind folks, if you could, in your breakout group, have a note taker and maybe someone who is willing to be the reporter when we come back to the full group. We would love to hear what has come up in conversation in your small group today. And, you know, as Yakir pointed to, we have such rich diversity here, and also many, many unique ways of doing this work. So we want to hear from all of you and bring the best of what we hear back to the main room. So we're going to go into breakout rooms for about 20 minutes. And then we will come back together and we will hear back from each of the breakout rooms. And then we're going to try to pull together some common themes that we hear that have come out of those breakout rooms. So with that, Asmira, I believe you are in charge of putting us into our room. So we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I am creating rooms now. Give it a minute, please.
Hello, are we a group? I think we are. Yes?
We won't be, because all of us as panelists will be assigned to a room.
Okay, so we're still waiting, right?
We are still waiting.
Yep, it's loading. Here we go.
Just takes a little while.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, here we go. Your participants will be slowly moved into one of the 3 breakout rooms. Please assign a note taker and you have 20 minutes. Reverend Susan, can you hear me?
I can't.
Was on your mind.
I
Big,
lost.
vague question as opposed to something much more targeted. But I'm just really curious to hear what everybody's thinking about right now. Does that sound good to you, Sana?
Same, yeah. That's good. So, yeah.
I saw Fletcher. I sincerely hope he's not in this big room. Reverend Susan, what happened? You were gone and then you ended up back in the main room?
Yes, I was trying to hit join the meeting and then it like went to a black screen. So I just joined.
Okay. So this
Hi all, I'm back here. I was invited to refresh the page in order to elect to go into the breakout room, and I think it put me back here.
Oh no. Okay. Let me see if I can reassign you.
Yeah, I had the same problem.
But so Jay, you've been
And
able to
it's me
join
again,
breakout
I
rooms
do.
previously?
With a black screen.
Okay.
So I couldn't see anybody. It happened the day last week, and I just
Reverend
went back.
Susan, perhaps you'd like to lead the discussion here while I try and get who is it? Fletcher back
Sure.
into breakout room 2.
I'm sure that here is handling marvelously. So I think Fletcher and I could
Not hearing you very well, Reverend Fletcher.
Hi, everyone.
Sorry, Reverend Susan. Not hearing you very well.
You're not hearing me very well. Oh,
Well, there's like a bit of static.
is that
Just go ahead. Just go
is
ahead.
that better?
Yeah, a bit. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. So hi everyone. I think Fletcher might be with us, but he may have been put in another room. This is the room for folks who got confused about the instructions, such as myself. I wonder if we have someone who is willing to serve as a note taker for this group. So many hands going up. Well, we wanted to. Oh, we have a couple of hands who have gone up. So Martina, thank you. We will ask you to be our note taker. Really appreciate that. And we're really going to focus on some of the similar questions that we talked about with the panelists in the main part of the session. And Fletcher is back with us. But we wanted to start with the question about why you think that more isn't being done on religion and ecology by major religious institutions. So would love to just pose that question to folks in the breakout. And feel free to jump on with your camera so we can see you. And to unmute yourself as well.
Well, I'll go quickly since I'm note taking, so I can listen to everyone in detail. I just think I agree. There hasn't been a coordination. I have a past life as process improvement, implementing all kinds of action plans from many stakeholders across multiple departments. And immediately I see, oh, well, we have all these amazing ideas, and how do we coordinate our strong interest to move some of these decisions? Coordination, yeah, and more people.
Great. So I love the coordination. So thinking about how we might be able to collaborate and coordinate better across religion and ecology groups and institutions, organizations, and what that might take to really build that coordination on a large scale, it sounds like. So yeah, and we know that there has been some resistance to the ecological message. Certainly, I mean, I speak as a member of the Christian clergy. We've done our own share of harm on this issue, as have some others, but definitely want to claim that for the Christian tradition. But wonder what others think about, the resistance to the ecological message and maybe how that's informing some of the entrenched resistance that we see.
Shall I go ahead?
Junior, yeah, your hand is raised.
I'm going to have to step away for a minute. Someone else go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Pat?
Yes, hello. I can't speak to the overall situation, but my observations of the most progressive churches in my community are that they are more focused on the more immediate social justice issues. And because climate change is still this vast, amorphous thing that isn't as in one's face as racial issues, for example, and other more immediate human-centered issues, it seems that some of the congregations who are progressive and who are engaged in the world are perhaps not placing the ecological crisis as high as some of the others, immigration rights, for example. I know that the element of care for the earth and awareness of the environment are part of their programs. I am speaking of Unitarians and Congregationalists in my particular area. And also the Buddhist organizations of which I'm a part are very aware of ecological issues. But again, the taking action or becoming linked with other groups doesn't seem to have happened as much in that area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I hear you talking about sort of this lack of a sense of urgency when it feels like there's more immediate issues that need to be taken care of by religious communities, whether that's immigration or, obviously many other things. And it seems to me like the challenge is also the fact that we haven't done a very good job of connecting the dots to climate and ecological challenges, which are so interlinked with these other issues as well. So maybe that's a good lesson for us as well. Religious institutions need to do a better. Wonderful. Thank you. And Junior, I see you're back. Did you want to share with us now?
Yeah, it's a question I put to the panelists, all the panel earlier. The usefulness or not of the words religion or religious and secular today, as compared, for example, with the words liberal and conservative. They're really meaningless, or they can be potentially, it seems to me. And I think what it brings into focus is the challenge of meaningful communication, the challenge of meaningful dialogue. we all believe something, whether we call ourselves religious or not. We're all coming from a place of belief to some degree, even in the scientific community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the challenge is to manage. Martina, you talked about the coordination. Smaller groups, more careful conversation.
Right. So the challenge of language, and in particular labeling, I think that is a really good thing to bring up, because of course our religious institutions are sometimes as politically divided as our political institutions are, unfortunately. So moving past some of the labeling that we have done, whether it's religious and secular or liberal and progressive versus conservative, that those aren't helpful ways to bring people together to solve a crisis together. Thank you. I think that's well said. I know we don't have a lot of time, and there's been a lot of chaos with the breakout rooms, so I want to move us along to, to one question that I just find really inspiring, which is, what are some of the faith-based models that are inspiring people and are most effective? And of course, so many of you are out there doing this work. We'd love to hear at least maybe a couple of examples in the time we have left of some very inspirational models for doing this work. So if you have something to share, please either raise your hand or at this point just jump on in.
Completely knocked off Wi-Fi, so I apologize for missing some of what was.
I don't think you missed anything. We just posed the question about what some faith-based models are that are inspiring people, but we hadn't yet had anyone jump in to share. Sorry about your Wi-Fi issues.
A lot of strange things have been happening during these sessions, and if you're me, I think it's interesting, right? Energy, trying to break it up.
I make a report on an example of a faith-based organization myself, although in some other sessions I heard of many that were doing fantastic work in sustainability and community. But it crossed my mind that there are many non-faith-based organizations doing a lot of environmental work and ecological work. And perhaps one of the challenges might be making a bridge between faith-based organizations that are perhaps interested and open, but not themselves doing much, with reaching out to groups that aren't oriented to a particular faith group. And again, both connecting dots and making connected communities.
Yes, yes, for sure. I know here in the U.S., Interfaith Power&Light is working both with faith-based partners and with environmental partners that are not faith-based in advanced public policy, for example. We're doing a lot of public policy work, supporting policies both, locally at the very local level, which is sometimes the place where we can make the best advancements. Sometimes our national governments are not very willing to act or are very, very slow in acting. But when we can work with our cities and our townships, local communities, and really work in particular with those communities that are most highly impacted from pollution, climate change, environmental degradation, to listen and learn from them and to help implement solutions by supporting the work at the local level, that is a place to me that the work can be very, very inspiring. So whether that's, blocking pipelines, as Fletcher had referred to earlier, in many places around the world, and here in the US, but also, putting up community-owned solar, for example. There are a lot of solutions that can be implemented at the local level. And yes, we have a hand raised. Sophie.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thanks for the question. At Find Impact Foundation, we work mostly with the investment part of the portfolios, which we think is also quite important. And I think one of very effective way for people to look at contributing to solving the climate change issues is already first to look that they do not harm with that portfolio. So trying to add a new lens for all this finance director to not only looking at the numbers, but also at the positive and negative impact of their investment. So we encourage them to really look, do I invest in harmful investment? We talk about fossil fuel. Do I engage with them to change their behavior? And there's a lot, but also to look at positive investment. And we've published recently at the Find Impact Foundation, and it's free, accessible for all. So I encourage you to go on the website and download the document. We publish a whole set of investable solution, which you can, if you know how your portfolio is managed, where you can invest along to fight climate change. And it's not only about renewable energy, it's about reducing food waste, it's about educating girls, making sure there's a lot of very different way to actually fight climate change with also your investment portfolio, or the portfolio of the pension fund who's managing your pension, or the foundation coming from your congregation. So I would love to mention that, and happy to put in the chat the website where you can download for free all the information we receive and we published the last time.
Thank you, Sophie. I see some heads nodding. It looks like folks would like that information, so appreciate you dropping that in. And certainly personal finance and climate finance overall is a big part of the solution. We know that we have to pay attention to what we're funding in this world, and reduce and eliminate funding for fossil fuels, at the same time increase investments for clean energy, and especially, I think, locally run clean energy investments. It does look like we are going back into the main room now, so welcome back, everyone. Really glad to see you. I know this was a little exercise in chaos with the breakout rooms. Thanks for hanging in there while this was all happening. I know I saw a number of you, other panelists, jump in and out of the room I was in. So hopefully we all were able to have some conversation in our breakout rooms. And we're going to do a little bit of a report back now from the rooms. And those of you who were note takers and or who were willing to be the speaker for your breakout room, whether that was might have been one of our panelists, or it may have been another participant. So we'll just try to do our best to figure out who's reporting back. But because I know that Martina from my breakout room is reporting back, I'm going to go ahead and turn to her first, and then we'll jump into some of the other rooms. So Martina, please go ahead and jump in and share some of the notes from our conversation.
Okay, I will be brief. There was a lot of amazing dialogue. We had focus questions. Why more isn't being done by major faith-based? And we came up with some issues of resistance. Also collaboration with faith-based and not, creating a broader bridge. There was a lot of discussion about labeling language and categories that might be not helping to increase dialogue or inviting certain members. We also talked about where there are some good examples of sustainable models that faith-based is involved in. And we heard from you about interfaiths policy, and that, you know, takes the faith-based groups to political discussions, and that creates a bridge there. And then looking at the funding for making sure it's sustainable, positive and negative.
Thank you. And I see Jasnika has a hand raised. I don't know if that means you're a reporter for your group, but I'll call on you.
I think one suggestion will be very useful. I am Equilibrium Global Platform for Sustainable Peace and Development, which means that we think that everybody has his place and we need just to help them to find their place. I think that the thing why FBOs are on the world scene today, it is not something which is the case, and I think that it is much more deeper than some concrete environmental issues. I think that it is time when two perceptions of reality actually are faced, one which is based on logical thinking and one which is based maybe on intuition, and it is actually in the basis of the relationship between science, which is more logical, and religion. It is belief whether something which is not physical exists or not. And this is the thing we can, how to say, develop in many, many directions. But I think that it is very useful to emphasize that those who are members of FBOs, they are mostly naturally intuitive, and they mostly naturally know that unity between physical and non-physical, and that their role will be also to help others to understand that, because in that way they will help people to understand the relationship between us and the environment, between logical thinking and intuition, many, many things, two sides of brain, two brain hemispheres, conscious and subconscious mind, many, many things. So I think that it is time to how to say, increase direction, and also help people in the world, not only working on these specific projects, but generally, though education, though media, to understand that. And I think that it is the very good way to help to join science and religion and art and how to say, activities that are logical based, and so on and so on. I think it is the time for help people to make their consciousness step forward and to understand them better. Thank you. That's what I want to say.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Do we have another reporter from one of our other breakout rooms ready to share?
I can share. Martin, you started to share and then you just left us to talking to ourselves. But
I suddenly was dropped from that group and ended up in Susan's, and then ended up in EAD. So my apologies, but I am sure that words of immense wisdom will flow from you, Henrik. So fire away.
I'm not sure about that, but we had some talk, at least, with people coming out and out of the room, and that's the reality, isn't it? Well, we discussed, we have at least what our expectation for this webinar was about, and what I felt in the room was the discussion in how important it is also to have this kind of grounding in different faith traditions to have the mandate, so to say, to be active on these issues, but also to see the importance of what we might call of just transitions, because what we see, the transformation that we are in need for, is also going together with many of our people in our basic congregations and so on. They are affected by the transformation, and we don't want to see them be left behind. So the just transition is an important part also for faith communities to talk about and to add to the agenda. And I would also say, in just in relation to what was said before, that the importance to have the dialogue between faith and science and understand how we together are important for contribution to take this further, because from scientific part they say we can describe it, but we don't have the real driving forces to changes. And I think that from the faith communities we have the driving forces, we had the ethics, we had the narratives where we want to go, and that should be a part of what our contribution should be to this discussion. So I'm not sure, maybe I added some of my own thoughts to this, but I took the liberty to do it. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Henrik. So glad you're with us today. And do we have any other groups that have a reporter that would like to share back to the large group?
Sophia from my team was taking notes from group 3. So Sophia, would you like to present some of the notes that you have taken?
Yes, thank you. So hello everyone. In the breakout room 3, we have discussed, we have mainly brainstormed on the question, why hasn't philanthropy not supported the religion and ecology movement in a most robust way? And it has been reminded that it is not only member states that are resistant or skeptical to faith-based organization and their leadership in environmental climate-related work, but also the civil society. So we need to think about how to work with them as we are supporting them and working with them on common issues with shared values. It has also been noted that most of the resistance comes mostly from Western NGOs, and we need to think about how to address it. To gather more support in general, has been highlighted that there are many battles to fight, as we mentioned, that the resistance comes from within the social organizations, in addition to the non-fear from member states. So the question is, how can we prove that we are not promoting one religion instead of the others? It has been mentioned that interfaith cooperation should be the priority, should really shine through among our efforts to address these resistances. There is a need to show how we are bringing people together and not working in isolation. Also, it was mentioned the importance of keeping hope and not giving in to despair. And also the importance of local work for everyone to take part of local initiatives. And this is from this local and grassroots work, then a series of connections can take place and then bring together people for interfaith cooperation.
Wonderful, thank you, and appreciate the importance of pointing to hope. And I think that's a role that faith-based institutions really can play, and not sort of we hope everything will get better, but this active hope that really inspires action, and the action that we've been talking about today. And are there any other groups that we missed? I know we got a little scattered, so I'm not sure if every group has had an opportunity to share back yet. So I just want to pause and see if there are any others.
Our group has not shared. I don't know if Sonam is on the call and would like to share, or I can share my thoughts.
Yes, I'm still on the call, but yeah, we got sidetracked by our own conversation, so we didn't really take notes. But I did want to mention that one of the participants in our room, Tony Rowland from South Africa, one of the key takeaways from the discussion came from a comment she made where she said, you know, the world is a family of families. And we then, I think of that share of that comment, it really emphasized the point that our faith communities are really so deeply connected at the communal level. And so because of that, we have this sort of upper hand and this great opportunity to reach at the grassroots household level, which other larger structures aren't able to do, aren't able to resonate. So maybe you, Yakir, you want to kind of mention what you share on that as well.
Sure. It was a really good conversation, and thinking about the culture change and behavior change on an individual and household level and communal level as something that faith communities are uniquely positioned to be a part of, while also understanding that that by itself is insufficient, that we need structural change, systemic change at the financial level, at the political level. And faith communities are uniquely positioned to sort of reach in both directions, to reach into communities and be part of the grassroots, real deep culture work, and to leverage that, to take that sort of wellspring of inspiration and move that into deeper systemic change. And we also had a conversation around this question around resistance in Jewish and in religious communities, and actually saying that in some cases there's real embrace and real excitement that in a time when there's real spiritual crisis around the world, connection to nature, connection to ecology has actually been a real boon for many religious communities, a real sense of depth and meaning and purpose and inspiration. And in that sense, our movement has really been embraced. So how can we leverage that embrace into, again, deeper structural change, systemic change, to make more sustainable communities and build a more sustainable world from that place of really religious inspiration?
Thank you. Very, very rich conversations in the short amount of time that we had for our breakout rooms, and I'm grateful that you all were willing to share your ideas, your wisdom, with the larger group today. And I've asked Yakir if he would mind taking sort of what has been reported out and synthesizing that a little bit to see if we can name some of the common themes that we've heard today. So Yakir, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to share that.
Thank you, Susan. It's a really amazing group of folks that is here today, and I only got to meet several of you. So to me, that's really the overwhelming feeling I walk away with is what a beautiful community this is. And again, just one of so many sessions, that you've put together, and this movement and its depth and breadth is really something pretty profound to behold. And how we think about collaborating with each other to extend our impact beyond where we are now is really the work at hand. And we see that there's limitations, that we want to go far beyond where we've been, but also a sense of progress from the early days of this movement and how far we've come, and the real work that lies ahead in this definitive decade on climate, on biodiversity, and the key leverage point that faith communities play. So both a sense of progress and a real sense of urgency to build upon the power and the potential of faith communities in every culture and every society, and to really empower new and diverse leadership to take on that work moving forward. I know this is just a snapshot, just the tip of the iceberg of all the conversations that have happened. To me, those are some of the key points. Susan, if I missed any, please jump in and help name it all, but really honored to be part of this conversation. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I know we're just getting ready to wrap up. I want to just take a moment to thank, first of all of our panelists who were here today. We had Chantal and Fletcher, Yonatan, we had Yakir, Martin, and Sonam with us today. Just huge being here. I'm so pleased to be in community. Also, big thanks to Iyad for his role in putting together all of these sessions, as we've referred to over these 2 weeks, to UNEP and the Faith for Earth Coalition, and also to Azmira for being our tech person today. We appreciate all the work that you've been doing to get us coordinated and keep us on track. And big thanks to all of you as participants. We're so glad that you're here. We're so glad that you're participating not only today, but in a number of these sessions throughout these 2 weeks. We're all learning together from one another as part of this global community. And it's important that we all continue to work together, to collaborate, and to build this movement, as Fletcher said earlier in our conversation. So thanks to all of you as well. And I just want to close really briefly with a small reading that I'll do just sort of as a blessing to all of us as we go out into the world. And this comes from a translation of the Tao Te Ching called the Activist Tao Te Ching. And it says, keep things in perspective and live as if the world we want has already come to be. Let our words and actions express the essence of the changes we may never live to see. Nothing we create will last. It will have its place, then disappear. So let's build it with joy, establish it with compassion, and hold it in our open hands. Thanks and blessings to all of you as you continue on your journey today, and I look forward to being in community with all of you in the days to come. Thank you.